It's July 11, 2019, and we're doing interviews for the Stanford Historical Society, and our person to interview this time around is Don Bird.
Where do you start?
We'll start with, who are your mom and dad?
My mother is Jenny Remsberger, and my dad was W. Pulver Bird. His real name is Walther Pulver Bird, but he hated Walther, so he had his initial first, W. Pulver Bird, he always used. The Pulver come from my fifth great-grandfather, which was Henry Pulver, who built the big house down there on Huns Lake Road, the Greek Revival.
And who was Henry's wife? Was he married?
He was married. It tells in the book here about all that. But his daughter married Virgil Bird, and that's how the Birds got in there. From Pulver to, it was only Pulvers for like 2 generations, and then Virgil Bird married his daughter, and that's where the Birds got into the house.
Okay, and then is your family somehow or other related to like the Carpenters and the Talmadges and the Thompsons up in that area?
No.
None of them?
No, none of them. No, the Pulvers were the ones we were related to. They're Henry Pulver came from over to Pulver's Corners, so he was an original Pulver.
Up on like Winchell?
On 199.
Up like Winchell Mountain,
Yes.
up on top of the hill there?
Yeah.
Huh.
So he was originally from there, and he moved over there, bought the farm, and there was a small house there, and then he ended up 2-3 years later built the Greek Revival.
So when was, like, around what year was that?
I think the house was built in 1829 or 39, something like that. But he was in there early 1800s it was. I'm not 100% sure what year.
And where did they originate from?
Where, who?
The Pulvers and the Birds.
Well, the Birds originally came over from England on a ship, but my book tells about that. There was 3 brothers, and they landed in what is Farmington now in Connecticut. Mm-hmm. And by grant of the king, they give them 2,500 acres. And one of them, I guess they had kids, and the kids, one of them came to Amenia, and that's how the Birds got over here. One went to Vermont, up on the northeast corner of Vermont is Bird Mountain. He helped start the Green Mountain Boys and fought with Ethan Allen. And then another one went to Michigan. There's a lot of Birds in Michigan, too.
So your Birds, when they came here, that was
like 1783 or...
So it was post-Revolutionary War?
Oh, yeah.
So were they in the Revolutionary War over where they were in Connecticut?
I don't know. That I don't know. One of my grandfathers was in the Civil War, because my aunt, I got his rifle, the long rifle, and she said he was in the Civil War, he used that in the Civil War.
And that was a Bird also?
Pardon? That was a Bird, yeah.
That was a Bird. Was he local?
Yeah, he lived right there, at the big house.
Huh.
Yeah.
And where's he buried? I wonder where he's buried.
Pine Plains in Evergreen. There's a whole plot up there. It's got Henry Pulver and Virgil Bird and Ruheimer Bird, and the whole family's buried there. Mary and Skilly Bird, that was my 2 aunts, my dad's sisters. But there's a whole plot right in the Evergreen Cemetery.
Interesting. And what about the Pulvers? Where did the Pulvers come? Were they Connecticut also?
No, they were. I don't know where they come from before Pulver's Corners, but he was one of the sons of one of the Pulvers in Pulver's Corners, and came over. Now where they were before that, I don't know. That was early 1800s, late 1700s. Mm-hmm. They bought the farm there.
And like what on the farm? What did they raise?
Basically, we've had dairy cattle the whole time. I mean, they had a few beef and a few pigs and a few chickens in between or during, and because basically, years ago they used to raise all their own feed. They had a big garden that everybody contributed to, and they had their own pork and meat and beef and chicken and vegetables, and of course they had their own milk, and they made butter and cheese and all that stuff.
Why I ask is because Morgan Carpenter, just beyond that, like where Carpenter Hill
Yeah.
is, that was all apple orchards up
Yeah, there was a big apple orchard up in there where Schwimmer's house is now.
Yeah.
There's a few remnants of some old apple trees. But,
Are there?
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that was all apple up in there, but our farm was basically dairy.
Dairy
I mean,
farm.
that was the real basis of it.
Do you have like anything that like described what the old house was like?
The what,
The
pardon?
old house that was there before the big house with the
No,
columns?
I haven't got, I didn't get any pictures. My sister ended up with most of them, and that didn't get them. Gail. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
So then that makes sense, because she would have lived in the house basically across the road from the big house?
Gail?
Yeah.
Well, she's got the other house down the road. You're thinking that Jean lived across the road there, my niece.
Okay, in the little Cape Cod house?
Yeah, and the little, that was the
And then Gail, did Gail live in the next house
next
down?
house down,
Yeah, it's got like
the big ranch
the lawn
house.
jockey out
Yeah,
in front.
yeah,
I didn't realize that was your sister.
yeah. She married Ed Sweeney.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did your family own the little house too?
Well, the
That was
little, above it?
it's towards the lake, where the two lake roads
Oh, well,
come together?
yeah, my mom bought that in '68.
So that wasn't really like a family house?
No, that
was
wasn't
just
nothing to
a-
do with it. That was
yeah.
just something they bought on. Bob lived there for, I don't know, 20 years or
Yeah, I
something.
remember when he lived there.
Yeah. No, they had the house with the real steep roof. My mom and dad built in 1929.
That's the one that's going towards your house past?
Yeah, between
Okay.
the big house and my
Yeah.
house. And that was built in 1929. Dad said, I think it was the Montgomery Ward house, was $3,950. And the fireplace didn't work, so they knocked off $250 because they didn't put a smoke shelf in it or something. You never could use it. And that was all plaster walls, hardwood floors, cedar roof, cedar siding, and it was all wired for electric and plumbing. We had no electric. The electric didn't come up Huns Lake Road. Dad always said 1937. So they lived there for 8 years with no water, well, they had water because they had a well with a pump on it.
Right.
They used to use the indoor plumbing. They'd go out and get a pail of water and fill the back of the toilet. But they had no running water in the house or electric for the first 8 years they lived there.
Wow.
Had a coal furnace to heat the place. So,
All right, so what else can you tell me about the big house and all that?
not really a lot. I mean, my dad was born and raised there, and he had two sisters. His father was Isaac Bird, which is my middle name, Isaac, and Grandma Catherine was his wife. And I mean, they had the farm there, and Dad worked on the farm. And then when Grandpa died, he left the farm to my dad and his two sisters, Mary and Marguerite. And Mary, Marguerite, and Dad didn't really see farming together, so they actually bought him out. And then he went down. Mother had bought the old Worsher place, which is the brick house on the square. It's over on the corner of the square, the brick house on 83.
Oh, okay.
Corner
Like
was
the
it?
Schaefer and...
Schaefer in 83, right there. She bought that farm like in 1955 off of Al Borscher. And she was farming there, and Dad was still at the main barn. And then when they bought her out, he built a brand new barn in 1957 over there, a 60-cow barn. 57, moved in 58, and it burnt down 59, July 4th.
Wow.
Lightning hit the electric pole in front of the barn and went in right down through the hay mow and set the whole barn on fire. And I don't know, we either lost 32 or lost 28. There was, I can't remember which one. I was only 6, I think, at the time,
Wow.
but there was a bunch of them that got killed, and then they cleaned that up, and then we rented, well, it was Goose Chase. That was Mrs. McNabb then. That was empty, and we rented that farm from 1959 to 1987 when we went out of farming.
And then Molly Schaefer took it over after
Well,
that?
Molly actually bought it. Mrs. McNabb died, and she bought it in about 83, so we rented it off of her for like 4 years or 5 years. And then we went on that government buyout program where they paid us not to make milk and supposedly helped the farmers, but I don't know if it did or not. But that was, so we were there.
So what can you tell me though about the Pulvers and the Birds? Do you have any good, like good history stories about them, or?
Grandpa, I guess, he used to bring the milk down here to the Borden Milk Factory, which is the town barn now,
Yeah.
the old town barn. And I guess the wheel broke off the wagon or something right up here by the creek. And it dumped about half of the milk right in the creek. You know, when the wagon tipped over, we got down to, I guess they got it fixed finally, he got down to plant, and they were teasing him down there about how the milk beat him to the milk factory. We're right by him.
It's a good one.
So,
But, like family garden, was there a big garden up there?
yeah, they had a big garden up there, and then some of the stuff was like up in the back behind it it was more farmland where they did like the potatoes, because they always planted a whole bunch of potatoes, you know, because all the families on the farm used to live off the the potatoes and sweet corn, and that was up in the back. But then the family had a big garden there that was, you know, that they always did for canning and all that stuff. Even my mother, when Mom and Dad, when I was a kid, they had a big garden there right just below the house. It was probably a quarter of an acre. It was all garden, because they used to can most everything then. She had a shelf down in the basement. It was probably 10 feet long and 7 feet high. It was right full of glass jars full of everything, right from meat to vegetables and pickles and all that stuff.
What was the big house like?
It was a house that normal person couldn't live in it. You walked in the back door, you were in what they called the kitchen. There was a wood cook stove in the kitchen, and at some point they got modernized and they put a little apartment model gas stove over in the corner. But then you go out into the next room, there was a big stone sink, and the spring water ran into that. That ran 24/7, 365 days a year. And that was the sink room. And then behind that, there was another room where they kept the pots and the pans and the dishes. And then over to the left, there was another small room where they kept like the silverware and the linens and that kind of stuff. Then you come back out into the main kitchen and go towards the front of the house. To the left was the pantry with a refrigerator in it. So, I mean, the whole house was like, you know, it was crazy. I mean, to cook anything, you had to go to 4 different rooms because the pots and pans were in there, and the stove was in here, and the refrigerator was over this way, and out in the back in the woodshed there was a freezer. So I mean, you know, it was just something it would take some getting used to be able to live there. I mean, they've totally modernized it, and all that stuff's gone now, because that part of the house isn't even there.
Oh, it isn't?
No. Nope. Because that was a little addition. That was the original house, was where the kitchen was, and then upstairs was the bedroom, the 2 little bedrooms, and then they built the main house in front of it. The big Greek revival was built in front of attached to, but in front of.
In front of the old house.
And then, I don't know, at some point in time, Dad always said they had the indoor outhouse. They didn't have to go outside to use the outhouse. They had a 3-hole outhouse, was back beyond the kitchen. You go in a little room there, and there was 3 holes, the 2 big ones and a small one. And Dad said there was a wooden box under it. That was always his job. He'd have to hook a horse onto it and take it up in the field and flip it over and bring a clean one back and put back under it. So that was pretty modern. They had running water in the house way back, who knows when. Probably when they built the house.
And they had a spring, you said that.
It was a spring up on the hill.
That came right down through the house.
And they had a lead pipe run down through to the sink. And just hung out of the wall. It was all plastered around. It was a piece of pipe about that long. It just hung and it just run in the sink, run across the sink, out of the drain in the other corner of it. It was a hand-carved stone sink. It was probably, that long, about that wide. It was only about that deep. But they had running water. And then Grandpa, I've heard Daddy tell about, he had a Delco power plant, which was a small generator. And they run it by one of those old hit-and-miss engines. You know, the ones that act like they're not running right. And they let that run about 2 hours in the morning. And in one room in the barn, they had a whole bunch of batteries. They were like car battery, but different. And they charged it all up. Then the barn and the house all had 12-volt lights in it. So they had lights in the barn and in the house. This is back late 1800s. They had electric, actually.
Wow.
So, I mean, they were...
They're pretty innovative.
Pretty, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And then, of course, they had the ice house up in the back.
And then they would go to Huns Lake to get the ice?
They went to Huns Lake, yeah. I guess that was kind of a community project, I guess. When they cut ice, there would be a bunch of them down there. And, you know, everybody helped cut, and everybody get a load. And then they come back and cut more. And
deliver it to somebody else's house and take care of them?
yeah.
Do you have journals or anything from your family?
Have
Or
what?
Journals or diaries or anything like that?
No,
Nothing?
no.
No. Do you have any treasures that you were able to save? from
I
your
got
family?
some antiques and stuff out of the farmhouse, and Aunt Mary gave me as a Christmas present. I got a wooden butter pail, which was, I would say, it was Henry Pulver. It was carved in the lid, HP. So that's got to be early 1800s. And they used to make butter and keep the butter in it. I got that, and I got an old rocking chair that's old. It's a real frail looking thing. And I've got the rifle that was used during the Revolutionary War. They're about the only relics that I've got of the family.
Wow. Yeah, because we had Asa Beckwith here earlier, and he was telling us about, he's got a couple of treasures too.
Yeah.
They're so lucky to have them.
Yeah,
It's
they're
pretty cool.
neat.
Yeah.
I got some other stuff, like it was Dad's hay hook and, little stuff like that. And a few of Dad's tools, that kind of stuff. But they are, the butter pail, that's pretty special. That's probably the oldest thing I've got.
Yeah.
There isn't a nail or nothing in it. It's all totally wood. Even they wrapped it with wood, and the way they did it is they bent the wood and hooked it in holes in the straps. And actually, steam didn't bend it all, and it's total 100% wood. Wood knobs that hold the handle, the bail on it, and a wooden lid that fits on it. And you open it up, you can still smell like a greasy, oily butter smell.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you know, where did they go to school? The family?
Dad, I don't know about Grandpa and them, but Dad, he used to walk down to the schoolhouse was on the corner of Schaefer and Huns Lake Road.
Right.
Set up on the hill. He went to school there, and then 1 through, I think, 6 or 7. Maybe they went to 8th grade. But then I know he rode the horse to Amenia and finished high school in Amenia High School. My sister Marge started school at the one-room schoolhouse. She was born in 1930, and she went there 3, 4, 5 years, and then they started the central school system, then she went to Pine Plains.
So they would walk to that school? They would
Walk or-
walk from,
Yeah.
yeah, or somebody would bring them maybe in the wagon?
In a wagon or, yeah, depending on the weather, I guess, had a lot to do with it, too.
Huh. Do you know, were there a lot of kids that went to that school, or that was just?
Marge has a picture when she was going to school. It's got, I think there was 22 kids. Of course, that was from kindergarten to 8th
Right.
grade. I think there was like 22 kids that went to it. She does have a picture of that. I don't have any when my father was going.
Is that the building that's?
It's up on top. Stillman moved it up on
It's up on, the crest of the hill?
top of
when you-
Pugsley Hill on the left. They
on
made
the
a house
left
out of
Before
it.
you get to where the big stone barns are?
Yes.
Okay,
Stillman moved it up there. I can remember when he moved it.
oh, really?
Oh, yeah. That was, I would say, in the mid to late 60s when he moved that up there.
And that was basically on the corner when you went, it would be on your left-hand side when you went in on
Yeah,
Schaefer
when you
Road.
turned in Streeter Farm Road, set right up on that corner.
On the corner there. So it was
Yeah.
like before the cemetery, basically, is where?
Yeah,
so
before the
there's no foundation probably in there where it's at, I wonder?
I don't know if it was that or it was just on top of the ground even. I'm not sure. I don't know. At that, when I was young, I didn't pay attention to stuff like that.
Yeah. Do you have any relatives in the cemetery at the bottom of the hill there? The one on Schaefer Road?
The one on Schaefer, I know that one, yeah.
Do you have relatives in that one?
No.
What about the one at the far end of Huns Lake Road where it comes into 83, the one straight ahead?
No, none in there, no.
Was
Not
there
that I
ever-
know of anyway.
Was there ever a family burial ground on the property up there?
Not that I know of, no. Because Henry Pulver, he would have been the first of the family, and I know he's in Evergreen.
He's up in
There's a
Pine
big
Plains.
tombstone, or a big stone there. I mean,
Yeah.
it's this big square thing, 15 feet high.
Yeah, the reason why I mention that is because we're finding a few houses around that had,
Their own
family
yeah,
plots.
family plots, but I don't believe they
Yeah.
did. I think it was all
They put them.
evergreen, because I know there's Virgil and Ruheimer and a bunch of the other birds and Lewis Bird and all them are on that stone. They got all the 4 sides of it. It's a big plot with a,
Do you have anybody in the Carpenter Cemetery?
no,
No, nobody's in
No,
that
no.
one.
No.
Okay, I'm just trying to think of what else. Federal Square, that must have been active then when your family built that house.
Yeah, I would imagine, yeah.
So, were they involved at all with Federal Square or anything like the store
Not
there, I wonder?
not that I know of. I mean, we farmed part of it there, because we owned the one corner there with the brick house, we had that. And then we rented the Molly Schaefer's there. We rented that area, and we were farming that, and that was a pasture and that, and it took care of most of the square.
Yeah.
Outside
Where was the store actually? What was it? More like was it a foundry?
I guess so. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure where it is
No.
either.
The only thing I know is that there used to be a brick foundry down in behind Molly Schaefer's, back in there.
Oh, really?
About where Karen Betchel's house is now, somewhere's in there.
Okay.
'Cause they made bricks.
That's the limestone house you're talking about.
In Karen Betchel?
Is that the limestone house?
No, that's that new one that she put way back in the back, where they got the barn out in the front and the big
Right.
long drive.
Okay. I called
Bottom
it
of
the
Carpenter Hill, or bottom of Huns Lake Road, and you
Right.
make a left back in there.
So
But
it's
way
back
back in
there.
there was because they bricks. There was a house on top. If you come out of Carpenter Hill Road, go right straight out through the field. That Carpenter Hill Road used to go straight out through the field, down along the woods, and in front of the old brick house with the brick wall.
Yeah.
Go in front of it, and then come back out onto Huns Lake Road, where it meets Strever, right there. Not Strever, Schaefer. And there used to be a brick house up on top of the hill. The old Culver house, which has got the brick wall now, that's a brick house, was built out of those bricks. Molly Schaefer's house, that's a brick house. It's all covered up with cedar, but it's all brick. There's a brick house going into Chicomico on the left. Just for you, on that little straightaway, it kind of sets back off to the left there. I can't tell you what that was another one was built. The Borscher house, well, I call it the Borscher house.
The one on the corner.
And then the next one out, Birmingham's, or it used to be Birmingham or Birmingham, out there, headed almost into Smithville.
So pretty much it sounds like they got all the bricks maybe from the foundry that was all right there.
Yeah, they
Square.
made the
right
bricks
there.
right in the back there.
And that
Up in
was-
the back of the farm too, they used to have a charcoal pit. I don't know who, I've heard that, it used to plow through the field and it was like a big dip like that, and it was all black dirt in there, and Dad said that was always a charcoal pit, they made charcoal there. I never really got much detail of it, I don't know if he knew much detail.
Because that was, Carpenter was the ones that had the Federal Square, the foundry down there, or,
Yeah, it was probably the Carpenters, because
Carpenters, Benjamin
Henry Clark owned a lot of Federal Square. He owned the Culver, both sides of the Huns Lake Road, right on up through. He owned both sides of Carpenter Hill Road, right on up past Murphy's. And he owned both sides of Conklin Hill Road, all the way down to that big house.
oh, wow.
It was like 3,500 acres. He came to my mom and dad in 1959, wanted to sell it. He wanted $100,000 for it. He wanted $10,000 a year for 10 years, no interest. At that point in time, they didn't think they could swing it, so they kind of turned it down. And they ended up, Culver's bought part of it, Murphy's bought part of it, and so I don't remember who bought down Conklin Hill then. But it was that big house, and there was a big house up to where Murphy's shop sits now. It was a great big old colonial house. I think that was Dibble originally. That's where they were. I can remember that house when I was a kid. That was in shambles then.
Really?
Yeah. They used to keep calves in it.
Because that part of town is a pretty old section, because that's where the Thompsons came over and got that big land grant all around Huns Lake.
Yeah, well, Thompsons are in the cemetery at the end of Huns Lake Road there
Yeah.
on 83.
Yeah. And actually, and then there's also Talmadge in there, Talmadge and, are in that cemetery as well. Because they're all Thompson, Talmadge, Carpenter, they're all interrelated.
Right.
I'm just trying to think of what else out that way. You can just talk too, don't rely on me to answer your question. I'm just trying to think.
No, I didn't know what went on Federal Square. That was way before my time. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, it was just farming area, and the cemetery was in the middle of it there. There's one plot in that cemetery. I don't know if you're familiar with it. There's a whole family, and they all died within a week.
No, is this the one on Schaefer or the one on 83?
It's on Schaefer.
Okay.
Schaefer. It's a mother and a father and like 5 or 6 kids. And they all
Really?
died a week. They were like 1800 something. I don't know. They probably
Right.
got something
Yeah,
plague
plague came through
or something like
killed
that,
them.
but it killed the whole family off within a week.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
kind of sad.
Did you ever hear the Chamberlain family out that way?
Chamberlain?
Chamberlains?
No.
No, because I know there's Chamberlain's out in that.
There's
cemetery.
Chamberlain's over in Smithfield.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that.
But they say the birds originally settled in Amenia. And then they come over.
Do you know where that was in Amenia they were?
No, I don't. Mm-mm. I don't really. But like on the farm and stuff, Dad had one of the very first tractors around here anywheres. He bought a 1929 Farm All Regular. It was a little, they're 12 horsepower, which is nothing today's standards. But that was one of the very first tractors around here, and it scared, and Grandpa, I guess, had a fit about it because he used to scare the horses. Well, they used to do, they did really farmed with horses up to, almost in the 40s. Did a lot of horse stuff. Yeah. So. Cutting ice, I've heard Dad talk stories. I guess he was out plowing on the ice there and the horse broke through. They used to put a choke rope on the horse.
We heard the same thing from somebody earlier today.
Well, I guess he used to put a choke rope on, because when the horse, I mean, like anybody, you startle them and they take a big deeper breath and you pull on it and it keeps them puffed up so they float, and you can usually get them out, he says.
Yeah, we heard the same thing about Upton Lake, about them doing the same thing to the horses on Upton Lake.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that was just kind of a safety thing, I guess. And you could float them back to shore or whatever to get them up out of the horses. And Dad, he used to tell all kinds of stories like that.
Did your family come over on the lake, like, because it was so close to Huns Lake as far as like the dance hall went, with Dillinger's dance hall?
That was, the dance hall wasn't until what, in the 50s?
No,
Yeah, 40s, 50s.
yeah, I think maybe, yeah. But then even before that, I guess they used to rent boats and things out of it, like when they used to have the summer cottages colony up there.
Yeah, they used to do that. And Elsie Blair was the one who used to come up. That's how she got coming up there. They built that house. She used to come up and stay in the Cliff House. They used to on weekends.
Oh, really?
Yeah, her and Roy. And then they go down to the dance hall there and drink and dance and go down. And then they liked it up there so much they bought that piece of property. And old Al Dillinger built their house up there. I think that was in 51 or 2.
Al Dillinger built a lot of houses.
He built a lot of houses around
the lake there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't realize that about Elsie though.
Yeah, that was Elsie. You knew her.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
She was quite
Right,
an old.
yeah,
She
right.
was quite an old girl.
Yeah, she sure was. I remember her driving a car. How old was she when she driving it?
Yeah, really.
Stand clear, Elsie's coming.
She had an old 65 Nova, and the transmission was so loose sometimes when you went up in second, we're going second and reverse. She knew enough to get out, open the hood up, and she could play around with the forks on the transmission, get it out of gear so she could go on. I mean, most women today wouldn't have any idea what to do. But she was quite an old girl.
What about Emily Stout? I mean, these are all people that were like out your end of the lake there. That were
I didn't really. I knew of Emily basically, but I didn't know her that well. Her and Art lived there. We rented the property. We used to make crops there. Art used to bring all his liquor bottles out and crush them up in the roadway going up in there. And he said they'll never cut a tire, and he just kept crushing them in there. That's what he always did. My dad, I've heard him tell about it. He used to have a party at the house. And everybody would come, and he'd look the bottle over if it was a good one. He'd put that down in the cupboard, and he'd bring out some cheap thing and put back on the serving counter. Emily, if you seen her coming, you wanted to get out of the way because she couldn't see or drive. She'd come right out across the driveway, sometimes cross the road right on out in the field. She wouldn't. She was terrible.
characters.
Huh?
Stanfordville characters, right?
Yeah. Then the Keever boys, that was another story over there.
Now Keevers, they were at the.
They were up where Molly Schaefer is now. That was Keever Farm. There was 4 brothers. There was John and Paul did farming. In fact, John was the assessor here for years in town. John and Paul, and then there was Shannon. He was a lawyer, and he had a nervous breakdown, and he was not the same after that ever. And Newt was just kind of a drunken bum. He'd sell a few things to get some little money to go buy and sit in the bar room, get drunk. And he come up the road one night with his old 49 Ford. It only had 3 wheels on it. Driving along, sparks flying out from under it. And he drove it all the way from the depot down here. The wheel fell off just to come out of the, well, where the red Devon is now. The wheel fell off, and he drove it all the way right. He got down on the dirt road, and it dug in the ground, and he couldn't go no farther. But he drove it all the way up on 3 wheels. Didn't even know it.
And they had apples too, right?
Yeah,
So
they had a
Kippers,
big orchard up in the back, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then, Henry Clark, his family was basically the carpenters, so that would have been the house like that burned down across the road.
Yeah, that would have been, that burnt down mid-50s maybe. And when that burnt, Henry moved down in the laneway across from me, in that little house, well, with the big barn behind it, right across the road from my house.
Oh, okay.
He moved down in there, huh?
Didn't
Brigman was in there,
move
yeah.
Okay.
Larry Brigman. Well, there's 2 vets in there now. Anyway, he lived there while he built the brick house. I'd say about 1960, I think he moved into his brick house. Was the one up on the corner he built that.
Did you ever go in his bomb shelter room downstairs?
Yeah, I've been in, oh yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
bomb shelter, fireproof, he had all his papers in there and
Yeah,
stuff.
I remember going there.
He was quite an old character.
Yeah. Actually, we ended up getting some things out of that room from Naomi and Dominic.
Yeah,
They gave us some old pictures and.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, and we have a binder set up with the things that they gave us
Yeah.
from there.
well then after Henry died, Jim took over, that was his son. Well, if he wasn't a spitting image of his father,
Really?
unbelievable. You'd think they were the same people. I mean, once Jim got older, as Henry was, he used to come, he was out in Rochester. He moved out there when he was out of college and stuff. He invented the soft contact lens
Oh, really?
for Bosch and Lum. That's what he worked for.
I know, I found an old newspaper article about Mr. Clark. He wanted to donate the property for a science center,
Uh-huh.
and New York State turned it down. For
Yeah, I heard that was about the same time he was trying to sell it.
Was it?
Yeah, it was like early 59, 60,
Yeah,
somewhere
but
in
this
there.
place, if they had agreed to it, that would have been some state of the art.
Yeah.
It would have put Stanfordville on the map, for
Map,
sure.
yeah.
Would have been a
Well,
big
you
thing.
talk about putting on the map. I've heard Daddy always told the story about Mr. Hershey come up here and wanted to buy Briarcliff. When that was that big dairy, well, here at the turn of the century, there was what,
Right.
2,500 cows they milked up there or
Right.
something like
And
that.
that was Oakley Thorne at that point, wasn't it? Thorne's out of Millbrook?
I don't know, no, I don't think it was before him even.
Was it? I know, cause I know Thorne was there around the, late 19 teens into the 20s.
Into the 20s, but before, just before that, it was like 1890, 1900. Hershey, they built Hershey chocolate,
Yeah,
wanted to buy that, and they were gonna put the Hershey factory right there. And they got so much squawk from all the town people, I guess they had a couple town meetings, he said, "The heck with it," and they went to Pennsylvania and bought that place.
wow.
Cause that was a lot of milk, they used to make all that milk, they had all of Bethel and Stockbriar and.
And the train went right through there.
And the
It was
train, well,
perfect.
they had the plant there, they used to bottle it all and homogenize it or whatever they did back then, pasteurize it, I believe.
Yeah.
And they had ice from all the lakes, they used to pack it in ice and go to the train to the city,
Yeah,
all
it's a
fresh
perfect
milk.
place to do something like that, yeah. I wonder what happened, in hindsight, what they thought years later.
Yeah, right.
Why did we give that chance up? So,
Yeah.
what about, do you know anything about like I'm just asking you different things about around the lake and down around the lake. There used to be the pheasant farm on 82, Dillinger's Pheasant Farm. Did you ever hear anything about that? It's
No.
north, would be north of the schoolhouse on 82. It was Frank Dillinger. It was supposed to be some type of a pheasant farm.
No,
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 didn't know
nothing.
about that one.
No, I know there was you go north of the schoolhouse there, right on that corner, there was a barn to the left and a house up on the right.
That would be it.
Okay.
That would be where the place was.
Was it? I don't know what it was. It was always run down. I think the house was pretty much gone when I was a kid, and I actually helped Jimmy Murphy tear the barn down. It was falling down. Dan Daly hired him to go in and tear it down and clean it up.
Do you know who used to take care of the schoolhouse, the one on Schaefer Road, the corner there? I know in Attlebury.
From the time it was abandoned from the time I was little. I mean, as far as I remember, nobody did nothing with it. It just sat there.
I wonder whose property that was that that they put it on.
I don't know.
At Attlebury,
Was it deeded to anybody? I don't even know who it was deeded to or nothing.
I don't know either.
I don't either.
Yeah,
But it would have been on the McNabb farm because they own all the way around it.
Yeah, so maybe they were the ones that would go in, because at Attlebury, the Mosier and
Cresswell?
they would go in and they would get the wood stove going and take, get things ready for the kids.
Yeah, yeah.
Like that type of thing, so I was just wondering maybe who.
Somebody, I think Marge was telling me, that the school teacher they had there used to stay there. And she'd get up early and get the stove going and keep the place warmed up for when the kids got there.
So maybe they had a room then
Just-
in the schoolhouse for her.
Yeah, because that was a pretty big schoolhouse, actually. And I think she had a little private room in the corner of it or something. I think that was Marge that said that, or was it Daddy? I don't know, one of them.
What else was out there as far as buildings? The farm, like your old farm, were there more barns on that property, or is that pretty much what was there? That the big house?
At the big house, there was a big barn there. It was it was a 40 cow barn, and then my dad added on it in the 50s. He went over to Chicago when they tore down the board and milk factory. He actually tore it down, used all that lumber and beams and stuff, put a big addition on the barn, and that was all there. And it held about 80 cows, plus a whole big hay mow up above it. And I think about the third owner tore it all down. It was close to the house, actually. So they tore it all down, that barn. That was on that farm. Where the brick house was, where we had that farm down Schaefer Road, that barn was a lot bigger than what it was. And when the other barn when Dad built the new barn and attached it to it, about a quarter of the, or left a quarter of it, burnt 3/4 of the old barn off also. So that made that a lot smaller. There was a big dairy barn right behind the brick house with the brick wall, Culver's. There was a 100-cow dairy barn there that caught on fire and burned down.
I think that was in 1974.
Yeah, I would say about, yeah.
I'm pretty sure that was Jeff's first fire.
Yeah, yeah, that was,
Because there were a couple of barn fires at the same time. There was
Yeah.
another one, was it Pilch's or something up in?
well, Murphy's barn burnt,
Yeah,
up there.
There was like a string of them.
yeah,
It was almost like somebody was doing something.
yeah.
I don't know if that was the case though, or what.
I don't either, but I know that was,
Yeah, there were a few of them.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. All right, so what else can you tell me?
probably got a lot of stuff to tell you, but I don't know where to start. I don't know.
Maybe describe what that book is, kind of hold it up for the camera.
The book?
Pretty cool book, yeah, and what kind of stuff do you find in there? If you can hold it up kind of.
There's a page, I don't know if you can, that's a hard book to hold around. Does that show up on your camera?
You gotta hold it up more
That's good,
towards
you
your
can
shoulder.
hold it there, I was gonna, alright, let's do it, great. Okay,
Virgil Bird.
Yeah.
That's cool, you got a picture of him.
Yeah, that's what I say. He was the one actually married. It tells in here, Mrs. Ruheimer, W. Pulver Bird, who was predominantly identified in the best social circles in the town of Stanford, where she resides at a fine estate near Chicago, is in a member of the family has been long held in high esteem in this locality. Her grandfather, William W. Pulver, so that was a German by birth, and it goes on to tell all things. It goes through the whole history of the whole family. There's 3-4 pages there. It tells who got married. Grandpa Bird's in here somewhere. It tells about Isaac Bird being one of the sons.
What religion were they?
Pardon?
What religion were they?
They used to go to the Presbyterian over in Smithfield.
In Smithfield.
Yep.
That's an old church over there.
That's another whole story, that church, isn't it? Actually, the main house, the big main Greek revival, used the same architect that designed the Smithfield Church.
Oh, really?
Yeah, was it Locke? I think it's Locke. He was an architect, and he actually did the plans for the Greek revival that Pulver built.
That's a pretty significant house and a pretty prestigious type house. So did Mr. Pulver make his money through the farming or to be able to build something
I
like
believe
that?
it was just through the farming. I'd never heard of anything other than that. I mean, back then, he had a lot of land that he had bought, and I think he started out with an inheritance where he came down, bought the farm, and then he, had a big farm. From what I understand, it was one of the largest farms in Dutchess County. He was milking 88 cows by hand. which is a lot of, they had like 11 men working that were milking. Each man milk 8 cows, and then they did the field work and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty big,
Yeah, I mean, that was a big operation back then.
sure was.
Yeah. But I don't know, they must have been money there somewheres of some. Yeah, but back then the whole house only cost, I think, 30. Aunt Mary used to have the book that when the house was built, the ledger, and it only cost like $3,200 or $3,800. The head carpenter only got like 12 cents an hour or something, and some of the laborers were getting 4 cents an hour.
Wow.
It was crazy. I mean, it didn't even make sense. I mean, how could you even think about surviving on 4 cents an hour?
I mean, 'cause
But
that's one of the really nicest houses.
Yeah.
It's so.
in the town of Stanford,
Yeah,
really,
it
I mean,
is.
it is.
It's really pretty.
I mean, those pillars in the front, I mean,
Yeah.
they're all hand done. Everything was handmade right there.
Yep.
It's amazing.
Pretty good craftsmanship there.
Yeah.
It makes me, I wonder if anybody in the family had it, because you've got the trade, right?
Yeah.
Maybe somebody way back had the same trade as you.
Yeah, but I mean, in the house too was fancy antiques too. I mean, well, they weren't antiques when they were bought, but I mean, it was fancy furniture. They had a cherry dining room set that was in there right forever. Had 12 chairs to it, and it had like 6 leaves went in it. And I mean, it was a really ornate table. You know, in fact, when Gail had the auction, sold all the stuff, that table brought like $26,000 worth of chairs. So I mean, that'll give you an idea what the table was. It was pretty, but there was a lot of stuff like that in that house. In the front hall, there was a hall, I don't know what you call it, a hall, tree hat, or tree hall, or whatever they call them. The big thing had a seat in the middle, and they had storage drawers on the
Right.
side, and you can hang your coats and hats on it, and mirrors on it, and I mean, that thing was all hand carved and all kinds of stuff in it. It was very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Oh.
Okay, what else? Tell us more about the
I
place.
don't know.
What was it called? Did they have a name
For what?
for the house? Did your family like give it a name?
Eagle Acres.
Eagle Acres.
Yeah, that's what it was always called.
I think we saw that in a picture. There's a.
Yeah,
Oh,
you
you
might.
know what the house resembles too? 'Cause that day Wendy and I stopped to see you. That house resembles the one over at Johnson and Johnson.
Is where?
Johnson and Johnson estate.
Oh, is that what it is?
That picture that we stopped.
Yeah.
Remember
Yeah, you stopped and showed me.
that picture? It turned out that that's the Johnson and Johnson, and it has a striking resemblance to the house.
Yeah.
So,
Well, there's another house down in LaGrange that looks a lot like it too. They say Locke designed and built that. There was an architect around here, I can't think of what his name was now, but he did some stuff around, and I did some dealings with him. And he was right into this Locke, doing research on what he did, and, you know, going looking at what he built and that kind of stuff. It was pretty cool.
I wonder where he came from.
Locke?
Yeah.
I think he was, from what I knew, out of Amenia. Now, where he come from prior to that, I don't know. But,
Do you know, like, the roadway that led up to the house, is the driveway that's there now, is that like the natural?
no.
No, it was all changed?
Huns Lake Road, my dad helped work on Huns Lake Road when they straightened it out. Huns Lake Road used to go up, way up closer to the house. And if you look, as you're going up the road, there's kind of a remnants of a stone bridge, or a concrete bridge, once you get by the house right there. And the road used to come up closer to the house, and it was like, and then come back out on the Huns Lake Road. And then from off of that road, there was a little driveway went up to the main house, and then the other one went up around in front of the barn. And then Huns Lake Road used to go down where the sharp corner is in front of our other barn. That used to go out into the field, and there was a great big elm tree there. It was probably that big around, and went around behind that and come back out sharp. And it went from there, and you could go straight and go right up over Brushy Hill Road and come out over by Streeter, by the cemetery. That was Brushy Hill Road. That got closed down years ago.
Oh, so where was that road?
If you're going up Huns Lake Road, you go by Tozer's.
Yeah.
If you drove right straight, you see that farm says Little Farm, the sign?
Yep.
Go right straight up through there, right up. There's 2 rows of trees. Go right on up through there.
So like it's up past where that, the trailer is? You
Go
go
up
in-
past behind the trailer and right on over through, went right on over the hill, down the other side. All those hedgerows are gone now. Culver took them all out. and it come out right down just about where Tom Sweeney's shop is there by the cemetery. That was Brushy Hill Road.
So you could either travel Huns Lake Road, which would take you.
Well,
down
Huns Lake
to-
Road didn't go down.
Oh, it wasn't there at that point?
No, it went up to where the monument is, and then you had to make a right, and you were on Carpenter Hill. And Carpenter Hill went down around across the field, down along the woods, and come out down where Schaefer.
Oh, so, okay, well, that's interesting.
This is
'cause
all
it-
that Huns Lake Road that's there now wasn't there.
Huh, I'm just gonna grab a map.
You got an old map?
Yep, I do. Just gotta get it. Because it's funny, because I've tried to figure that out because of the way the road goes on the map.
Well,
And I'm
that's
like,
one reason the Culver House down there, the brick house is headed south basically, which isn't towards the road, which is very unusual. You know, you used to build houses and the front of them went towards the. Are these the old roads?
So this would be out the back of the lake. See, this is, I got very confused out here about how the roads went.
Oh, this isn't as old of a map. You see this road goes right on across here and comes
Yeah.
out down by the square.
Yeah,
You see, here's your square, come right on, that's Brushy Hill Road. And then Huns Lake went up here, that's the Pulver, and went up the top of the hill. But then this road wasn't here, this come down through here more and come out this way.
huh,
Come out right in front of, well, it was whatever that is, JBC. That's the old brick house now. Then there was another road from Huns Lake, well, that's on, you got that one on there.
oh, that went out the back of the lake and
Yeah,
up
went-
to Conklin
and-
Hill, right?
Yeah, went up to Conklin Hill. We used to use that all the while when I can remember as a kid, used to go up, there was a barn up in there we used to use to store summer machinery in the wintertime.
Well, that explains that, because like I said, I've looked at this map a number of times and I'm like, how the heck did this road go? But Brushy Hill,
Brushy Hill
I
Road.
gotta look for that. Did you ever hear,
That's why we named the farm Brushy Hill Farm.
Oh, yeah. Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Did you ever hear, Huns Lake Road just before, you get to the fork there? You're coming up Huns Lake Road from Layton.
Okay.
And, that little hill there leading up to the schoolhouse, it was called Tin Roof Hill?
Tin Roof Hill.
Yeah,
And then the other hill just before you come up to Old Land, that was always Stein's Hill. Because that was Stein had the dairy farm there halfway up it, where Dritzemans, I don't know, you
yeah.
probably Dritzemans.
Voices in Richmond, yeah.
Dritzemans and them.
Huh.
That was Stein, that was Stein's Hill.
Steins
And
Hill,
then the other one was Tin Roof Hill, I've heard that from Dad.
and then Brushy Hill.
Well, Huns Lake Road used to go over, at the corner of the lake, used to go up in front of the apartments and go over through the woods over there and come out down just above where Rudy Zitz lived.
Yeah, you could see
You
that
can
old
still
road
see
in there a little bit, the remnants of it.
Yeah, that was all travelable when I first started driving. It was a little dirt road. Then the south end of the lake, there was another one cut across behind the schoolhouse.
Oh,
You
yeah,
go-
I know where that, I know.
You used to be able to drive over that too. That was a little dirt road.
Do you remember the barn that was at the end of the lake there? Or that was down, that was probably down before
Which,
you were.
where?
It would be basically, across from Dave Robertson's driveway. You know, where the bridge is at the end of the lake
Yeah,
there?
yeah.
There was, if you were coming towards the lake, Dave Robertson's driveway would be on your right.
Right.
And then the bridge is
Bridge,
there.
yeah.
And then on the left side there was supposedly a 5-story barn there.
No, I
So,
don't remember
I
that.
think that.
I remember the barn, Ordman's barn, when that was still standing
Yeah, I remember that one too,
Yeah.
yeah. That was,
across from there. Because Ordman was in the bigger house to start with, and he moved in the little house. That was the tenant house for the farm. He owned both of them.
so he was in Joyce
He was in
Adams?
Joyce Haddon's to start with, and he sold that to, I think maybe Joyce then, and moved in the little house. Because that was the tenant house for the farm. The farm was across the street there, the barns and stuff.
Wow. So that, and that all butted up to Weathersfield up in there,
Well, Weatherfield owns it all now, but
yeah.
it did. We used to butt up Weathersfield too. Yeah. The Borscher farm over there on the square, the brick house, that bordered the hall on top of the mountain there, bordered Weathersfield farm, top of the hill. And then Stouts there, we used to use that. That was all bordered against Weathersfield.
Interesting. And then
I've heard Dad tell, he was talking about Weathersfield and over in that area, Keevers over there on the one field. They were out, I don't know, getting the cows one day and they seen a hole was in the field. Oh, you heard this one? Oh.
Keep going though.
And I guess it was a round hole, it was like 16, 18 feet in diameter and it was about 30 feet deep. It just fell right out and gone. And they had some geologist, Leif Erikson or somebody, I don't know. They set a tripod up and he went down in a chair and a rope and they hooked the Jeep to it and let him down. There was a river running under the, washed all the dirt away. And I guess they had Andy Davis come up there with a bulldozer and they pushed great big rocks in it and filled it in. But there's still a big sinkhole there. It's probably 6 foot down from being level. Dad, I guess they were all, Dad went over there because they called him up and he went over and the three of them are laying on the ground hanging on each other's ankles so they could see down in the hole, see what was in it.
It's funny, yeah, because when we did the Apple thing that came up, we did an Apple thing for the county, Dutchess County Historical, and there was a comment about the big sinkhole
Yeah,
on the thing.
I guess they had a lot of people come over there
Yeah,
to see
they
it.
thought it was like some kind of thing, like maybe, you know, like what?
The aliens landed.
Yeah, some big hole there, somebody's down there. Yeah,
So that was something.
yeah.
All kinds of little stuff like that.